So hello everyone. So today we are going to learn asynchronous JavaScript, and I found this short meme on Instagram, and this meme is related to asynchronous JavaScript and I found it funny. So let me play this. Yeah. So hope you understood this meme. If not, then don't worry. And we will go through this entire video. We will try to learn asynchronous JavaScript concept, and let's see whether this meme is funny to us at the end of this video. So the topics that we will be going to cover in this video are: first, synchronous versus asynchronous JavaScript. Then we will cover async and await and what are these keywords. Then we will look into real world application of asynchronous JavaScript by creating our tiny website. So one thing that we know is that JavaScript is synchronous in nature. It is single threaded. Unlike Java, C++, and Java are multi-threaded, but JavaScript is single threaded. That means one thing at a time. So I know that all these terms like synchronous, single-threaded feels and seems like jarring. So don't worry, we will go through lots of example in this video, and we will try to first understand the synchronous nature of JavaScript with one example which I have. So this is the example which I was talking about. So in this example, let's take a road trip to Goa. Over here, you can see there is a guy sitting on bike. That's me. So, and I need to reach Goa. So the job is simple, just reach Goa. But there is one catch. I also need to collect three packages from three different houses. So as you can see, there is house number one and house number two. So to collect packages from house number one and house number two and then reach Goa is simple because house number one and house number two are located on the same lane or on the same highway. I don't need to change my route to collect the packages from these two houses. So, okay, the job is simple, but there is also another house, number three, over here, as you can see. For to reach house number three, I need to change my route. I need to take a detour and then come back and then carry ahead. So, how the process would take place in this particular case, how the things would flow. So, okay, I will start my trip to Goa. First, I decided to go to house number three, which would take around 2 hours to collect the package from house number three, and then another more 2 hours to come back to the main highway. Okay, so this would take around 4 hours just to collect the package from the house number three. Then I will start my road trip again, and I will reach house number one in 2 hours, and I will collect the package from house number one, and then I will collect the package from house number two, which would take another 2 hours. So let us calculate the total time. To reach house number three, it took 2 hours, and then come back to the highway, which took another 2 hours. So total 4 hours just to collect from house number three. Then to reach house number one, it took another 2 hours, which sums up to 6 hours. Then to reach uh, house number two, it took another 2 hours, which sums up to 8 hours. And then I reached Goa finally after another 2 hours, so which adds up to total of 10 hours just to reach Goa in this particular case. So this is the synchronous way of reaching Goa. Why synchronous? Because I was doing things one thing at a time. That is, I was going to house number three first, then collected the package, then house number one, then house number two, and then I reached Goa. I was not going to all the three different houses simultaneously and collecting the package. Why this was the case? Because I was alone. I did not had any friend with me to accompany me to Goa, and hence it took me around 10 hours just to reach Goa. So let's try to code this particular example into JavaScript, and let's try to understand the synchronous nature of JavaScript with this particular example and by coding this into JavaScript. So here is the example to reach Goa synchronously. There are a couple of syntax that we will discuss over here. So I have written a method called as sleep function. So this sleep function, you don't need to focus how this works, but you just need to understand what it does. So what it does is that it tells JavaScript or the JavaScript compiler to sleep for 2 seconds. 2000 means 2000 milliseconds over here, and 1000 milliseconds equals to 1 second. So hence 2000 milliseconds equals to 2 seconds. Okay, so what sleep does? It tells the JavaScript execution to stop for or to pause for 2 seconds and then execute the next line. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Don't try to understand this function. If you are able to understand this function which I have written, then it's a good thing, but it's okay if you are unable to understand this function for now. We will go through this and all these logics ahead in this course. So let's just focus on the example which we are trying to build, which is the synchronous nature to reach Goa. Okay, so it takes around 2 hours to reach number house 3 and house number 3 and then collect the package. Okay, so it took 2 hours to reach house number 3 and collect the package, and more 2 hours to reach back to the main highway. Okay, so more 2 hours, which is sleep for 2 hours or 2 seconds, came back to highway, and it took me more 2 hours. So total of 4 hours by now. Then another 2 hours to reach house number 1, then another 2 hours to reach house number 1 and collect the package. Okay, and then another 2 hours to reach house number 2. Okay, so another 2 hours to reach house number 2 and then collect the package. So right now we are 8 hours in, and another more 2 hours to reach Goa. So in total we are reaching Goa in 10 hours. Let me try to execute this code. As you can see, first house number 3 gets printed, came back to highway, took more 2 hours, then house number 1 took more 2 hours, house number 2 took more 2 hours, and finally I reached Goa in total of 10 hours over here. So this is how the synchronous JavaScript works. So as you can see over here, the code is getting flowed from top to bottom. The execution is happening from top to bottom. You can imagine this scenario as similar to a stack. What happens in stack? Things get executed from top to bottom. Whatever things which is placed on the top of the stack gets been pulled out first. Okay, so same thing is happening in this case as well. What is happening? JavaScript compiler sees this particular line number 1 and executes it line number 1 first because it is situated on the top of the stack, and similarly line number 2 and so on. So things are happening synchronously. So this is what I mean by single threaded, that things are happening synchronously, one thing at a time, line by line, going from top to bottom. So okay, so I hope the synchronous way of JavaScript code execution is clear to you, that the things happen from top to bottom, line by line, one thing at a time. Okay, so this was the case when I was going to Goa alone. I didn't had any company with me. I don't have any friend with me to accompany me to Goa. So it was taking me around 10 hours, and things were happening one thing at a time. So let's now imagine a case where I have a friend to accompany with me to Goa, and let's see how the scenario changes. So now let's try to understand the asynchronous nature of JavaScript with this particular example. As you can see, I am over here, but this time I am not alone. I also have a friend with me to accompany me to Goa. So what he will do, I will tell him simply to please collect the package from house number 3. Meanwhile, I will collect the same packages from house number 1 and house number 2 as well. And then let's meet at Goa, and you hand over me package number 3 which you collected from house number 3 to me when we both reach to Goa. Okay. I hope this part is clear. Okay, so now let's start our journey to Goa with a friend. So what my friend will do is that he will go to house number 3, and it will take around 2 hours to reach house number 3. So in that 2 hours, I will collect the package from house number 1 as well simultaneously. These two things are happening simultaneously. My friend getting package from house number 3 in 2 hours, and I also getting the package from house number 1 in 2 hours. All these two things are happening simultaneously. So now in just 2 hours we have collected two packages from two different houses. Okay, great. So for my friend, he have took some shortcut to Goa. So in just 4 hours he will reach Goa. Okay, so good for him. And then in next 2 hours I will reach house number 2, and then in next 2 hours I will reach Goa. So for me now it just took 6 hours to reach Goa. Whereas in the previous case, as you can see, as I was alone, I didn't had any friend to accompany me. So I was going to house number 3 and then coming back, which took 4 hours, and then more 6 hours. In total, I was taking 10 hours to reach Goa. But with help of a friend, I was reaching Goa sooner, just in 6 hours, and my friend was reaching even sooner than me, which was just in 4 hours by taking a shortcut. Okay, so I hope this particular concept is clear. So now let us try to code this particular example into JavaScript, and let us find how this example is different from the example which we saw previously, where I did not had any friend with me to accompany me to Goa. But and let's see how these outcome of these two different examples varies, and let's try to code this. So here is the code to reach Goa asynchronously. Okay. So what's written on the top of the code? I have written a set timeout function. What is set timeout function? Set timeout function is provided to me by JavaScript, and what it does. So set timeout function is by default a asynchronous JavaScript functions, and what it does, it simply execute the block of code which is written in the first parameter of its arguments, and it will execute that block of code after whatever time which is mentioned in the second arguments of its parameter. Okay, so I hope this is clear what set timeout does. It is a asynchronous inbuilt JavaScript function. What it does, it simply executes the first block of code written inside the first argument after the time provided, which is in the second argument. So what it will does, it will console.log this particular line after 4 seconds. I hope this is clear. So as soon as JavaScript compiler encounters set timeout, which is an asynchronous function, inbuilt JavaScript asynchronous function, what the compiler will does is that it will give this particular block of code and it will assign to someone that you take care of this. I don't care about it. You just simply give me the output after 4 seconds. Okay. And what the compiler will do is that it will continue to execute the code written below it, which is synchronous in nature, and this will happen line by line. So this is similar to what we did in the diagram. Uh, the set timeout is like I'm telling my friend, you go and collect the object from house number 3 and meet me at Goa and hand over me the package. Meanwhile, I will go to house number 1 and 2 and I will see you at Goa. Okay. So this is the exact same thing happening over here. I am saying my friend that you do the job which I have assigned it to you, and in meanwhile I will go to house number 1, then house number 2, and then we will reach Goa. I hope this particular part of code is clear to you. Now let us try to execute this code. So now let's try to run this code. So first I reach house number 1, collect the package, then house number 2, collect the package. Finally, after 2 hours, I will reach Goa in total of 6 hours. And then the code which was written inside the set timeout function gets executed at last. Okay, so what was written inside it? Friend collected the item from house number 3 and he handed over the package to me once we both reached to Goa. So one thing which is very important over here to understand is that even though my friend is reaching Goa prior to me, 2 hours earlier than me, he cannot hand over the package to me which he collected from house number 3. Why? Because I am not there to collect it. Even though he reaches Goa prior to me, he cannot hand over the package to me because I am not there to collect it. Okay. So similarly, if I open the code over here, so as you can see over here, as soon as JavaScript encounters an asynchronous function, the JavaScript does not care about it anymore. It's like I am assigning my friend some task. Okay, so I trust my friend to do that task. Meanwhile, I will continue to do the task which is in my bucket. Okay, so JavaScript is single threaded and all the code which is written synchronously gets executed on its main thread or on its single thread. Okay, so JavaScript will only care about the code which was written synchronously. It will execute all the block of code which was written synchronously once there is nothing to execute. So now JavaScript would be interested for the result of the asynchronous execution. What it will does, it will simply fetch the result of the asynchronous execution to the main thread and simply displays it. Once all the synchronous part of the code has been executed successfully, that means that once I have received all the packages from house number 1 and house number 2, which is located on the main highway or on the main thread, and once I have reached Goa and there is nothing more to go ahead or nothing more to execute, only then I can collect the package which my friend has received from house number 3, which is nothing but the block of the code which is written inside the asynchronous function. Okay, so I hope now you are familiar with the asynchronous behavior of JavaScript, and now we will try to understand how in the background this asynchronous JavaScript implementation happens. So now let us try to understand synchronous and asynchronous behavior of JavaScript and how the code gets executed in the background with help of this website latentflip.com/lupe. So first, let us go with the example for the synchronous way to go Goa, and I have simply copy pasted my code from the VS Code over here, And over here, you can also see that there are three more components on the right side of the website, which is call stack, web APIs, and callback queue. We will understand these each and every component in detail by executing this code one by one. And what's the role of these three components in the execution of JavaScript code in the background. So let me try to run this code. So first the sleep method gets called, and as you can see, this sleep method and all its statements mentioned inside the sleep method is visible only in the call stack. Later on, again the sleep method calls, and the console.log eventually gets printed over here, as you can see. So all these things are happening from top to bottom, and all these things are only visible in the call stack component. Nothing has been visible in the web APIs component. Nothing is visible in the callback queue component over here. Everything is happening inside the call stack component. So as I've said that this is the synchronous code, right? So it is expected that whatever execution is happening is going to happen on the main thread, right? So whatever output that we are getting displayed in the call stack component is nothing but the uh, statements or line of code getting executed on the main thread line by line from top to bottom. Okay, so I hope this particular part is clear. So now let us try to understand how code gets executed in the background when we are running asynchronous JavaScript code, and how web APIs and callback queues come into the picture. So here is my JavaScript code to reach Goa asynchronously. Basically, this is my asynchronous JavaScript code. So at the top, as you can see, I have written set timeout function. I have called set timeout function. So as soon as JavaScript encountered the set timeout function in the call stack, the whatever block of code which I have written inside the set timeout function will get executed after 8 seconds. A timer of 8 seconds will be initiated as soon as the set timeout function is encountered in the call stack. In my case, I have written an anonymous function inside the set timeout function. So this anonymous function will get executed after 8-second timer will go off. So over here, as soon as the 8-second timer will go off, as soon as the 8-second timer will go off, the result of my asynchronous JavaScript code will get registered inside the callback queue. Then once all the synchronous block of code has been completed and there is nothing to run more code on the main thread, at that time the event loop will come into the picture, and it will fetch the output of my asynchronous execution into the call stack, into the main thread, and then displays the output. Okay, so now I will try to run it. As you can see, set timeout was in call stack first, then the anonymous functions get registered into the web APIs, and the timer has been set for 8 seconds. After 8 seconds, the output of my asynchronous JavaScript code gets registered inside the callback queue. Meanwhile, all the synchronous code is being executed on the call stack simultaneously. As soon as my synchronous code is being executed, event loop will fetch the anonymous function from the callback queue to the main thread or to the call stack. I will rerun it. Set timeout, anonymous function. The timer for anonymous function has been set for 8 seconds. Once 8 seconds are done, anonymous functions come into the callback queue. Meanwhile, all the synchronous code is being executed simultaneously on the call stack, and the event loop comes into the picture. Once all the synchronous code has been executed, event loop fetches the output from the callback queue to the call stack. So this is how execution of asynchronous JavaScript code happens in the background. So next we are going to learn async and await, a very important topic to implement your own asynchronous JavaScript functions. And with help of async and await, you can write your own user-defined asynchronous JavaScript functions. Usually your self-created asynchronous JavaScript functions will be written on top of a JavaScript predefined function such as set timeout, read file, etc., like a wrapper on top of a predefined JavaScript async functions. So what I'm trying to say is over here is that with help of async and await, we can create functions. Those functions basically will be created as a wrapper on top of predefined existing JavaScript asynchronous functions like set timeout, read file, etc. And let's try to understand this concept in deep with help of some examples. So over here on the left side of the slide, you can see my previous code which I have written to reach Goa asynchronously. Over here in the red highlighted box, it is nothing but the set timeout JavaScript predefined function in which I am telling my friend to collect the object number 3 or package number 3 from house number 3 and meet me at Goa. Okay, so I have converted this particular predefined JavaScript function and wrapped it inside a another function called as friends help on the right side of my slide. Okay, so what I have simply done over here is that simply wrap my set timeout, which is a predefined JavaScript function, into a like a wrapper function called as friends help, and I have called this wrapper function from another function called as async call to friend. So over here you can see that I have used the keyword async before defining async call to friend function. So what is this async keyword? Async keyword simply helps to convert our normal JavaScript functions into asynchronous function. Okay. And inside it, I have called our wrapper function friends help. And even here, I have not simply called the wrapper function friends help. I have also used await keyword with it. So what is this await keyword? So let me go back to the diagram. Over here, I have asked my friend to please collect the object or to collect the package from house number 3 and meet me at Goa and hand over it to me. Okay. So what my friend told me is that my friend gave me a promise. You don't worry. I promise you that I will collect the package from house number 3 and I will meet you at Goa and I will hand over it to you. You don't worry. It's my promise. So this await keyword is nothing but it acts like a promise to our asynchronous operation for our asynchronous operation that once all the code which is written synchronously and all the synchronous code has been executed on the call stack or on the main thread, once it is finished, then await keyword helps to fetch our the result of our asynchronous execution to the main thread and like a promise. Okay, so it will return a promise ultimately. So where this await keyword comes into the picture, let me show you a diagram in this website. As you can see, there is an event loop in this orange color. Once each and every synchronous operation has been executed on the call stack and there is no more code to execute, then it will event loop will look into the callback queue. It will retrieve the retrieve the result of the asynchronous operation and pull back into the call stack. So over here, await somehow helps over here, and internally this operation is taking place of fetching from the callback queue with help of event loop. So over here the await keyword comes into the picture. So now let us try to understand why and how asynchronous JavaScript is been implemented in real world websites with this simple example and the simple website which I have created. So this website is divided into two parts. First is enter the number. Once you enter your number in this text field and click on generate sum, the sum will be generated beneath it from 0 to whatever number that you have provided inside this text field. Okay, so this was the first part of the website. Second part of this website is the text area. So imagine like this that this text area is nothing but different components of the website like sidebar, comment section, notifications, etc., subscribe button or whatever it is. Okay, so imagine this text area as different part of the website. So website is divided into two parts. First part enter number and generate its sum. Second part is the text area. Okay. Okay, so now let us see its code. So over here is the HTML for our simple basic website. Don't worry if you are not comfortable with the HTML part. We will look into HTML in deep in the future part of in the further part of the course. Over here, I have simply written an input tag. What input tag does it simply accepts the input from the user, whatever they are going to enter in the text field. Uh, so this is the text field, and with help of input tag, we are able to generate this particular output or this particular text field on the DOM. Okay, so later on, I have created a button called as generate sum, and I have added an event listener on click event. Whenever we click the generate sum button, these three lines of code will get executed. Okay, so As you can see, I am calling generate sum method over here and passing value to it. What's inside the value? Whatever value that you will enter inside the text field over here, beside of enter number, that particular value will get passed inside the generate sums parameter. Okay. So what does generate sum is doing? Generate sum is simply calculating sum from 0 to the value which you have entered from the text field and returning the sum of it. Okay, a for loop has been executed over here. Cool. So one thing you would have noticed over here is that I am calling generate sum method synchronously. Okay, I'm calling it synchronously. So let's check what happens in the website. Okay, I will click on generate sum. As you can see, the entered number was not too large. Okay, so immediately I got the summation, and I am also able to use the other components or other parts of my website, which is text area in this case. Okay, so but now let's imagine a case where the entered number is too large and it would take a lot of time to fetch the output of the summation from 0 to that particular entered large number. Okay, so in this case, let me refresh this. Let's enter a big number, try to generate some. You can see I am unable to use the text area or the other parts of the website. It took me some time. It took some time to calculate the summation in this case because the entered number was used, and meanwhile I was unable to use the text area or other parts of my website. Okay, so why? Because I was calling generate sum synchronously, and when I was calling synchronously, code execution was happening line by line, and unless and until the output of generate sum was not ready, the line present beneath it, the line present beneath it, that text content finish generating sum, and also you can still use me. These two lines of code were not getting executed because generate sum was called synchronously. So once the output of 42 is ready, only then 43 and 44 line number can get executed in synchronous JavaScript execution. So now let us observe the same example again, but this time we will call generate sum asynchronously. Okay, so this time we are calling generate sum asynchronously, and let's observe the outcome. So over here, you can see I have called generate sum inside the set timeout function. So set timeout function is a predefined JavaScript asynchronous function. So I am calling this function asynchronously. What would happen in this case if I entered a large number from line number 36? This will be considered as asynchronous. So this will be happening in the background, and meanwhile on the main thread, the line number 43 and 44 will keep on getting executed. Our website will not get blocked. You could still be able to use our text area. Okay, so let's try this out. So let me enter a bigger number over here. I will click generate sum. As you can see, I can still use this website. I can still use the text area and different components of the website. As I said, the text area is nothing but the different components of the website. And once the asynchronous operation is completed, I will also get output for the generate sum method. And still, and simultaneously, I would also be able to use the website as well. So now let's imagine a scenario where we can use asynchronous JavaScript in real life cases. So suppose you need to fetch your previous orders. Okay, so to fetch a previous order, you need to hit an API which is hosted on a server, and ultimately that API would fetch or retrieve the data from the database regarding your previous orders of past 1 year. Now, you are not the single user, right? There would be lakhs of user hitting the same API, hitting the same record they want to fetch, right? So in that case, there might be a scenario that the server is becoming slow or your database have become slow. So in that case, what would be the solution? So suppose if you have wrote the code synchronously, the code to fetch data from the database is written synchronously. What would happen is that until and unless the data is not been retrieved from the database, your entire website would get blocked unless and until your data is not being retrieved from the database. So nobody would would like to use your website because your website is slower than the other. So in this case, what you can do, you can incorporate asynchronous JavaScript. You can simply write your code to fetch data from the database asynchronously in using async and await. And what it would do is that the time in which it is fetching data from the database. Meanwhile, you could also use your website. Your website is not getting blocked, it's not getting hanged. Okay, you could also use your website simultaneously, and meanwhile the data is also getting fetched. Once the data has been fetched, it will get displayed, and meanwhile you would also be able to use your website. Your website would look more faster and smarter. So this is the use of asynchronous JavaScript, and you can implement asynchronous JavaScript with help of async and await keywords. Okay, so I will try to refresh this page, and as you can see over here, the video was still getting fetched and the thumbnails were being fetched prior to the video. So you are also able to click on the thumbnail, but it's not necessary that the response of your video should be already been fetched, and only then you could click on the other parts of the components of this website like this thumbnail and all. The video is still getting fetched, but you are still able to use the different components of the website. So over here, this is the reason why asynchronous JavaScript is being used in DOM, and this is how we can incorporate it in our websites. We can simply fetch the data for the video asynchronously. So that's all for today's video, guys. I hope you liked it. I hope you understood the concept. And in the next video, we will be understanding the fundamental of backend, what are backends, and how we can create our own backend routes with help of express.js. Thanks for watching and please stay tuned.